Hello, my name's Tom, and what I want to do today is try and explain a few things, paradigms if you will, that have occurred to me. Let me just adjust this camera a little bit. I think it's just going to be, it's going to be up a little bit. Okay, I'm going to try and explain paradigms. Now, what I'm doing here, I'm not espousing any particular religion or political view or scientific view, except insofar as the paradigm that I develop. And I may draw from well-known political views or religious views or scientific views to demonstrate this. Now, also I'll have a preface to say that I'm coming from I'm going to use thermodynamics in this quite a bit, because that just means, well, I'm using it at a macro scale, so I'm ignoring, I suppose, quantum theory to some extent. But I'm saying that's okay because the paradigm I'm developing is to be used on the scale that we exist on, which is a macro scale. And I realise there's issues by doing that, but let's just, for now, put that to one side. So what am I trying to do here? Well, when I say paradigm, what I mean is, imagine, for example, you understand your tables, your 12 times tables. You don't actually understand the logic behind them or the rationale, so you understand like a parrot would understand them. Yes, you could recite your 12 times tables, but you couldn't apply that knowledge to, say, an unknown. You couldn't apply that knowledge to, say, 54 times 22, because you've only learned the tables in parrot fashion. When you understand the paradigm between how to multiply numbers together, that you actually understand what the number 2 is and what the multiplication of another 2 means, once you get the idea behind it, you can then go on and apply it to numbers beyond your 12 times tables. It's just that there's sort of this nexus that allows you to apply the two together. So, paradigm means a system, as I'm going to use the word, a system that allows you to encompass other systems, so you get a deeper understanding. So when I develop a paradigm, the paradigm I'm looking for is the paradigm that will encompass all other paradigms. And as soon as the paradigm that I arrive at no longer encompasses all other paradigms, so I found another paradigm that encompasses the last paradigm I had, then I expand to that paradigm. So I'm trying to find, if you will, a general solution paradigm. And I have to say it's a general solution paradigm to human existence, or everything as we understand it, or even maybe we don't understand it. So I'll call this, I've actually got a name for it, it's called ThermoMemetica paradigm. That's ThermoMemetica paradigm. Now I may jump around here a bit, but I hope the viewer will fill in the parts that they may want to read up, or you may want to look at memetics, thermodynamics, paradigms, and a few other branches of science or knowledge that we may touch on. Let me just check this is recording. Is it recording? Yes, I believe we are recording. So, I don't know how many of you had the opportunity to read about memetics, or possibly Richard Dawkins, and he wrote a book called The God Delusion. Now, interesting book, and the idea of there's another book called The Meme Machine, another book called The Selfish Gene. The Selfish Gene was by Dawkins, I think. Anyway, it's not really the man who wrote it, it's the subject matter I'm interested in. Now, I have to say, let me just put the output. One of the things that disturbs me about Dawkins was, at one moment he decries religion, yet he approaches his science with a religious fever. And I'll tell you an example of what I mean. When you look at and I'm not going to tell you what I believe one way or the other, but I'm just going to say to you, or I think one way or the other, I'm just going to say to you, when you look at how Dawkins treats evolution, for example, or how the scientific community treats evolution, the problem is there's always going to be an element, well, there is an element of faith in the science they exercise. And it disturbs me when the scientific community doesn't see this. So, for example, we have faith that our senses work and that they represent reality. But I think everyone kind of accepts at a level that what they see, and maybe not what they see is what they believe, but they generally interact with reality with their senses. But let's go a bit beyond that. For example, if you look at something called Koch's postulates that demonstrate the existence of a disease, you've got to have repeatable, sort of a repeatable establishing of that disease caused that outcome. And it's a little bit more complex than that, but basically it's repeatability. And for me, I feel comfortable with science when I can tell you a repeatable experiment. And okay, that repeatability, I don't know what's going to happen next time, but the fact I've done it 10 times before, you know, the law of gravity works every time I try it, I'm prepared to believe it will work in the future. But one of the problems is, as a scientist, when a scientist travels back into, say, let's say some parts of evolutionary theory, is, okay, for example, I may be able to see a bacteria now inherits a characteristic from another bacteria and may become, as we define it, another species. But in my lifetime, I haven't seen in nature or even in a laboratory, I haven't seen a dinosaur become a bird. I haven't seen that evolution. And of course that may take, according to evolution theory, millions and millions of years to observe. But that's my point. As soon as you start, for me, going something beyond repeatable experiment, the amount of faith involved, I think, for me, increases. Because, yes, I could look at, let's say, radioactive decay in thorium or some, I'm not quite sure, some very long-lasting elements, say, try and date this particular age. But there's assumptions in that. In fact, I can't repeatably prove it. I can't run evolution of the species in a laboratory or in the world because I would need millions and millions of years to do it, to test that theory. And then I'd like to repeat it a few times just to make sure I got it right. So, I suppose that's why it's called a theory. So I find what I'm trying to get at is you've got to be aware there's an element of faith that everyone imputes into their science. And it's where they feel comfortable at that cut-off of faith. And for me, faith, I find the leap of faith in, let's say, evolution as it's taught at the moment, evolution of the species, I think there's quite a lot of faith involved there. Because they're, more or less, I can't run a repeatable experiment. Yes, I can look at elements of it, I can kind of see circumstantial evidence, but I can't run the actual experiment. And I think there's a sort of elasticity, the amount of faith that we impute into many things. I mean, where do you feel comfortable with? And that's one of the things about Dawkins' book I would criticise, is that he becomes slightly fundamentalist in his approach. He becomes a fundamentalist scientist. So rather than looking at, let's say, what he would classify as a religion, say Christianity or whatever